This is The Exchange. I'm Laura Kanoy. Today in The Exchange, it's a New Hampshire take on the president's State of the Union speech last night, where he outlined policies on a border wall, on the economy, a little bit on foreign policy, and other themes. We're hearing from Granite State analysts, and in just a moment, we'll hear from the state's Young Republicans and Young Democrats organizations. And of course, let's hear from you too. Our number here in The Exchange, 1-800-892-6477, 1-800-892-NHPR. Our email, exchange@nhpr.org. With us now on the line is Ross Berry. He's treasurer for the New Hampshire Young Republicans. Ross, really nice to have you. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm sure this was a big event for you and your group. Where did you watch the speech, Ross, and who were you watching with?
The party had a big get-together at a restaurant in Manchester last night. I watched it at home with my girlfriend via a streaming service, like a good millennial.
Okay. Sometimes people have these watch parties and so forth, and sometimes it's a quiet event in your sweatpants at home. So I appreciate that. What was your reaction, Ross, to the speech?
My reaction, I loved how the president outlined the successes the administration has had so far. The State of the Union is a great opportunity for us as a party to kind of cut through the negative messaging that is pervasive in the media and talk about the important things that matter to the people. And one of the big things that resonated for me was the jobs. I believe you guys talked about it earlier. It's the economy, stupid. The jobs are doing great, and I consider myself a middle-aged millennial. I graduated college right at the height of the recession, so I remember what it was like to be job hunting for the first time and see job postings for entry-level jobs that required 2 to 3 years of experience. And I'm excited to say that it's almost the complete opposite now. My company is having trouble hiring people. We can't find them. When people have jobs, they're contributing to the tax bases, they're buying homes, and they're living out the American dream. And I'm glad the president focused on that.
In addition to the economy, Ross, what was your biggest takeaway from this speech? Or if you were to write a headline about this, what would you say?
Kind of the secondary breakaway was the emphasis on foreign policy and the president's desire to end these what seems like endless wars. I'm 29 years old, and the country has been ostensibly at war for almost 2/3 of my life. So I was glad on a personal level to hear that we're going to start considering our options in the Middle East.
Anything that surprised you, Ross?
I was surprised, and I believe Chris mentioned earlier that the president had brought up the abortion issue out of New York and most recently Virginia. He's correct. The party has tended to shy away from these issues in general. But I think what we see going on here nationally is very scary. And, I know we have Dr. Smith with us today, who's a pollster expert. And I was just looking at the most recent Gallup poll from about June of last year, and it shows that only 13% of Americans think abortion should be legal in the last 3 months of the third trimester. It was very interesting as a Republican to kind of see the party actually lead on this issue. It's normally an issue, especially as a younger Republican, we tend to shy away from social issues, and that was something that kind of struck me as different.
Was there anything missing for you, Ross, where you thought, I kind of wish he said that?
I'm a fiscal conservative through and through, so I was very pleased with it. So long as we're talking about creating jobs, cutting regulations, keeping more money in people's pockets, I'm pretty happy.
The president mentioned the tax cut, and from a fiscally conservative standpoint, there have been estimates that this tax cut has hurt the nation's fiscal underpinnings. I wonder what you think about that.
I mean, I would love to see some spending restraints come with this. It's hard to get politicians in general to agree to spending cuts, and the biggest thing you need to know is what I call DC math. When you do your budget at home, or when I do my budget at home, I don't consider getting an automatic increase every year. I consider that I'm essentially going to make the same as next year, and if I make more, that's awesome. But in Washington, D.C. math, it's assumed that you're going to get an increase every year. So we can't even have conversations about stopping automatic increases And it just goes to show that Washington is broken. I would love to see the budget get reined in. I would love to see the deficit get cut. I'm a hardline fiscal conservative, but even I would consider changing cuts for a revenue increase. But that's never going to happen. You're always going to get one or the other. They're always going to increase spending, or they're going to cut taxes. And if I got to choose one or the other, I'm going to cut taxes.
So, but as a fiscal conservative, taking a line on the deficit and debt was not in the speech. Probably sounds like you would have liked to have heard that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I know that's been a theme in some past State of the Unions. What about the long conversation about the border wall? The president describing the situation at the southern border in very dire terms. How did that hit your young Republican ears, Ross?
So it hit me on multiple levels. I'm originally from Houston, Texas, so I was born and raised in a border state. I grew up around immigrants. Houston is an incredibly diverse city. And the big takeaway people need to understand about immigrations of all types, legal and illegal, is that the vast majority of people are coming here for their kids. They're not coming here for themselves. They're coming here they want their kids to have the American dream. So, but you do have to understand that when they come here, there are negative effects. The biggest thing that I take away is from a 2014 survey just released by the Census Bureau that shows that 63% of non-citizens in this country are on some form of welfare. Well, when that happens, that means that there's less resources available for the citizens here. And and the policy of our party has always been to take care of American citizens first before we start taking care of other people. And it's just the cold, hard reality that we live in. There's only a fixed number of dollars to go around. And we can't continue to put our hands over our ears and act like this isn't happening.
One more question for you on the border wall and immigration, since that was a big theme in this speech. Multiple fact checkers this morning said the president's statements on the dangers at the southern border were either untrue or greatly exaggerated. How concerning is that to you, Ross, that the president gets up there and presents these items as facts when, in fact, many of them are not true?
Well, I would point to the recent busts at the border involving fentanyl and how that relates to here in New Hampshire. We obviously have a raging opioid epidemic, but in May of last year, there was a bust where they took down enough fentanyl that would have killed 28 million people, 26 million people here in America. So they can say what they want, and they can once again they can act like it's not happening, but it is very real. The drugs are coming up through our southern border. They're not, there is a certain amount that comes in through airports. We have to concede that. We have to get that as well. But the vast majority of it is coming up through our southern border. And the fact that we were willing to shut down the government, it's the first time in my young life I've seen Democrats not want to spend money. So I'm stunned that we can't even have basic conversations about securing our border and protecting our people, because it's not just we can have conversations about crime and welfare and all those other things, but the simple fact of the matter is they're using this incredibly porous Swiss cheese border to import literally tons of fentanyl and opioids that are killing Americans up here.
Well, and there's lots of fact-checking online, NPR, New York Times, Washington Post, and other sources. So we'll set that aside for the moment, but I think there will be some more discussion about this on the air on NPR and NHPR later today. In your role, last question for you, Ross, please, and again, you've been generous with your time. In your role as treasurer for the New Hampshire Young Republicans, if you could chat with the president for a few minutes, what advice would you give him to appeal to younger voters?
Yeah, actually, I think he hit on it, which is jobs, 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 jobs. Every one of my friends that I talk to, they are concerned about their jobs. And so long as we are going back to that bread and butter Republican issue, I believe we're going to be just fine. And if we get off of that messaging, the voters are going to respond as such.
Well, Ross, it's been good to talk to you, and we'll talk to you again.
Thank you so much.
That's Ross Berry. He's treasurer for the New Hampshire Young Republicans.